It was a warm, sunny afternoon in the park. Children's laughter filled the air as they played on the swings, ran around the grassy fields, and enjoyed the carefree joys of a day outdoors. Among them were Olivia and her 5-year-old son, Liam. Olivia, a devoted black mother in her 30s, cherished these moments with her son. Liam, with his bright blonde hair and fair skin, was the spitting image of his father, David, who was a white man. The love between Olivia and Liam was undeniable as they laughed together, sharing stories and snacks on their picnic blanket. They had spent hours at the park, playing games, running through the grass, and enjoying each other's company. Olivia pushed Liam on the swings, and he giggled every time he soared high into the air. Afterward, they sat together under the shade of a large oak tree, munching on sandwiches and sipping juice. Olivia loved these afternoons, where nothing else mattered but her and Liam's happiness. As they enjoyed their time, not everyone at the park was as carefree. Mrs. Perkins, an older white woman who frequently visited the park, sat on a nearby bench. She had noticed Olivia and Liam earlier and had been watching them closely ever since. Something about the sight of a black woman with a white child didn't sit right with her. Despite seeing their obvious connection, Mrs. Perkins' mind was clouded by her own biases. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. As she watched them, her suspicion grew. In her mind, there was no way this black woman could be the mother of such a fair-skinned, blonde-haired boy. Mrs. Perkins quickly jumped to the worst possible conclusion. She convinced herself that the boy must have been kidnapped. Her heart began to race as she imagined all sorts of terrible scenarios. Without taking the time to consider the love and care she could clearly see between Olivia and Liam, Mrs. Perkins made a decision. She discreetly reached into her purse, pulling out her phone. Her hands trembled slightly as she dialed the number for the police. When the operator answered, Mrs. Perkins spoke in a hushed but urgent tone. "I'm at the park and I'm seeing something very strange," she said. "There's a black woman here with a white child, and it doesn't look right. I think this child might be in danger." As she ended the call, Mrs. Perkins watched Olivia and Liam with a mixture of fear and self-righteousness. She believed she was doing the right thing, protecting a child who might be in harm's way. Little did she know, her actions were about to cause a great deal of pain and confusion for an innocent family. The warmth and happiness of the day would soon be overshadowed by a storm of suspicion and prejudice that no one saw coming. As Olivia and Liam finished their picnic, tidying up their blanket and packing away the remains of their lunch, they were unaware of the trouble brewing nearby. Suddenly, 2 police officers appeared, walking briskly toward them. Olivia noticed them right away, and a feeling of unease crept over her. The officers' faces were serious, and there was no smile or friendly greeting as they approached. "Excuse me, ma'am," one of the officers said, his tone firm. "Can we ask you a few questions?" Olivia was caught off guard. She glanced at Liam, who was still happily playing with his toys on the blanket, but she could sense the sudden tension in the air. "Of course, officers," Olivia replied, trying to keep her voice calm. "Is something wrong?" The officers exchanged a glance before the first one spoke again. "We received a call about a situation that needs checking out." "What's your relationship with this child?" he asked, nodding toward Liam. Olivia's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected this, being questioned about her own son. "This is my son, Liam," she said, her voice steady but laced with confusion. "We're just spending the day at the park." Liam, sensing something was wrong, looked up at his mother with wide eyes. He quickly scooted closer to her, wrapping his small arms around her leg. Olivia gently stroked his hair, trying to reassure him, but she could feel her heart beginning to race. The second officer, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "Do you have any identification, ma'am? We need to confirm what you're saying." Olivia was hurt by the request, but she reached into her bag for her ID. "I don't understand," she said, handing over her driver's license. "Why are you asking me these questions?" "Liam is my son. Why would you think otherwise?" The first officer took the ID, glancing at it before returning his gaze to Olivia. "We need to be sure, ma'am. It's our job to follow up on these calls." Olivia's mind raced. Who would have called the police? Why would anyone think she wasn't Liam's mother? She looked at the officers, trying to keep her composure, but it was clear they didn't believe her. They asked her for more proof, something to show that she really was Liam's mother. The tension was rising, and Olivia felt a mix of frustration, fear, and sadness. Nearby, Mrs. Perkins watched the scene unfold. She felt a sense of satisfaction, believing she had done the right thing by calling the police. She didn't realize, or perhaps didn't care, that her actions were causing real harm to an innocent family. All she saw was what she wanted to see, a situation that in her mind didn't add up. As the officers continued to question Olivia, Liam clung to her even tighter. He was confused and scared, and Olivia's heart broke as she saw the fear in his eyes. She knew she had to stay calm for his sake, even though every part of her wanted to scream that this was all wrong. The officers, still not convinced, continued their questioning, making Olivia feel like a suspect rather than a mother enjoying a day out with her son. She did her best to answer their questions. The situation was growing more unbearable by the second. All she wanted was to protect Liam, but now she was the one under suspicion, and it was tearing her apart. Liam, who had been clinging to Olivia's leg, began to sense that something was very wrong. The serious tone in the officers' voices, the way they were treating his mother, and the fact that they wouldn't stop asking questions. None of it made sense to a 5-year-old. As the police continued to press Olivia, Liam's confusion turned into fear. His little face scrunched up, and before long, he started to cry, holding onto Olivia even tighter. "Mommy, why are they being mean?" Liam's voice trembled, tears streaming down his cheeks. The sight of her son so scared broke Olivia's heart into pieces. She knelt down, wrapping her arms around him, trying to soothe his fears. "It's okay, sweetheart. Mommy's here," Olivia whispered, her voice filled with love and reassurance. But inside she was struggling. How could she protect Liam from this when she was being treated like a criminal herself? The fact that the officers couldn't see the obvious love between her and Liam made the situation even more unbearable. The officers, however, didn't let up. They continued to ask question after question, their skepticism evident in their tone. Olivia tried to explain it, again and again, that Liam was her son, that she had every right to be with him, and that there was no reason for their doubts. But they seemed determined not to believe her. Growing desperate, Olivia reached for her phone. "Look, I have photos of Liam and me together," she said, scrolling through her pictures with shaky hands. She showed the officers image after image, pictures of birthdays, holidays, and ordinary moments at home, all showing a happy, loving family. But the officers barely glanced at the photos. "We need something more official," one of them said dismissively, as if the moments of love and care captured in those photos meant nothing. As this went on, a few parkgoers began to gather, watching the scene unfold. Olivia could feel their eyes on her, adding to the humiliation. Here she was, a mother trying to enjoy a day out with her son. And now she was being treated like a suspect, with strangers gawking at her as if she had done something wrong. Mrs. Perkins, still sitting on her bench, noticed the tears streaming down Liam's face. For the first time, she felt a small pang of doubt. Was this really a kidnapping? The boy seemed so genuinely afraid, but it wasn't the kind of fear she had imagined. It was more like the fear of a child seeing his mother in distress. But even as this doubt crept in, Mrs. Perkins quickly pushed it aside. She convinced herself that she had done the right thing, that it was better to be safe than sorry. But for Olivia, the situation was becoming unbearable. Her patience, which she had fought so hard to maintain for Liam's sake, was wearing thin. She was exhausted, hurt, and humiliated. All she wanted was to take her son home. But instead, she was trapped in a nightmare, her love for Liam being questioned by strangers who refused to see the truth. The pressure was building, and Olivia knew something had to give. But what would it take for these officers to see that she was telling the truth? How much more proof did she need to provide before they would believe that Liam was her son, and that she was his mother? The frustration and pain were overwhelming, and Olivia could only hold on to Liam and pray that this ordeal would end soon. As the situation continued to spiral, Olivia felt the weight of the world pressing down on her. She knew she needed to end this nightmare, and there was only one person who could help her do that, her husband David. Desperate and with no other options left, Olivia reached for her phone, her hands trembling slightly as she dialed David's number. David answered quickly, his voice filled with concern when he heard Olivia's shaky tone. "David, I need you," Olivia said, trying to keep her voice steady for Liam's sake. "The police are here, and they don't believe that Liam is our son. They're treating me like I've done something wrong. Please, can you come to the park?" David didn't hesitate. "I'm on my way," he said firmly. "Just hold on. I'll be there as soon as I can." Olivia hung up the phone, feeling a mix of relief and anxiety. She turned to the officers, her voice trembling but determined. "My husband is on his way. They'll clear all of this up. Please, just wait." The officers exchanged skeptical glances but agreed to wait for David's arrival. However, their doubt was still palpable, and they continued to watch Olivia and Liam with suspicion, as if they were waiting for her story to fall apart. After what felt like an eternity, Olivia saw David's car pull up near the park entrance. He got out and rushed towards them, his face a mixture of worry and determination. The moment Liam saw his father, he let go of Olivia and ran to David, tears still streaming down his cheeks. "Daddy," Liam cried, throwing his arms around David's legs. David scooped him up, holding him close as he hurried over to Olivia. He wrapped one arm around his wife, pulling her and Liam into a protected embrace. The officers were visibly taken aback by David's arrival. The sight of this white man, obviously deeply connected to the woman they had been treating as a suspect, completely shattered their assumptions. They watched in silence as David comforted his family, their earlier confidence starting to waver. David, still holding Liam, turned to the officers. His voice was calm but firm, leaving no room for doubt. "This is my wife, Olivia. And this is our son, Liam. There's been a terrible misunderstanding." One of the officers, trying to regain some composure, asked, "Do you have any proof of what you're saying, sir?" David nodded, still holding Liam close. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "I have plenty of proof," he said. He quickly showed the officers a series of family photos, pictures from their wedding, holidays, and most importantly, Liam's birth certificate, which clearly listed Olivia and David as his parents. As the officers looked at the photos and documents, their expressions changed. The skepticism drained from their faces, replaced by a mix of embarrassment and regret. They realized they had made a huge mistake. The story Olivia had been telling them was true all along, and they had doubted her simply because of the way she looked. One of the officers cleared his throat, looking visibly uncomfortable. "We're sorry for the misunderstanding," he said, trying to maintain professionalism, but his voice lacked the authority it had before. "We were just responding to a call, but we see now that everything is in order." David didn't respond immediately. He was still focused on Olivia and Liam, making sure they were both okay. When he finally spoke, his tone was measured but firm. "You should never have put my wife and son through this. They did nothing wrong, and you made them feel like criminals." The officers had no response to that. They simply nodded, clearly aware that they had no defense for their actions. The realization of their mistake hung heavily in the air, and they knew they had wronged an innocent family. The officers, now fully aware of the mistake they had made, stood before Olivia and David, their expressions a mix of embarrassment and regret. "We're truly sorry for the misunderstanding," one of them said, his voice lacking the authority it once had. "We were responding to a call, but we can see now that we were wrong. We should have handled this situation differently." Olivia listened to the apology, her heart heavy with frustration and anger. She had been treated like a criminal in front of her own child, and no apology could take away the pain and humiliation she had felt. Liam, still shaken from the ordeal, clung to David's leg, his small body trembling with the aftershock of fear. David held him close, rubbing his back in a soothing motion, trying to calm him down. Tears welled up in Olivia's eyes, but she fought to keep them from spilling over. The officer's words felt hollow, a poor attempt to make up for the emotional trauma they had caused. She wanted to scream, to demand why they had doubted her so easily, why they had judged her based on nothing but the color of her skin. But instead she took a deep breath, holding her emotions in check for Liam's sake. As the officers turned to leave, Mrs. Perkins, who had been watching everything from a distance, suddenly felt a heavy weight settle on her chest. She had been so sure she was doing the right thing, but now, seeing the relief and love on David's face as he comforted his family, she realized the gravity of what she had done. She had caused an innocent family unnecessary pain, all because she had let her own biases cloud her judgment. Overcome with guilt, Mrs. Perkins slowly walked towards Olivia and David, her hands trembling slightly. She had to admit her mistake, no matter how difficult it was. As she approached them, Olivia looked up, her eyes still filled with unshed tears. I'm so sorry," Mrs. Perkins stammered, her voice shaking. "I was the one who called the police. I thought something was wrong, but I was wrong. I let my fears and biases get the better of me, and I'm so sorry for what I put you through." David looked at Mrs. Perkins, his expression unreadable. Olivia's emotions were more evident. Anger, hurt, and a deep sadness at what had transpired. Mrs. Perkins' apology, though sincere, could not undo the pain she had caused, but at least it was a start. "I was just trying to protect the boy," Mrs. Perkins continued, her voice small and filled with regret. "But I see now that I only caused harm. I'm so sorry." Olivia, still holding back her tears, nodded slowly. She could see the remorse in Mrs. Perkins' eyes, but the damage had been done. Please, next time, think before you act. Olivia said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. You didn't protect anyone today. You just hurt an innocent family. Mrs. Perkins nodded, tears forming in her own eyes as she realized the full extent of her mistake. She had judged without understanding, and now she had to live with the consequences of her actions. Olivia stood there for a moment, absorbing Mrs. Perkins' apology. The pain and frustration from the ordeal still weighed heavily on her heart, but she knew that this was an opportunity to turn a painful experience into a powerful lesson. Olivia took a deep breath and looked at Mrs. Perkins, her voice calm but firm. I appreciate your apology, Olivia began, her eyes meeting Mrs. Perkins's. But what happened today was wrong. You made assumptions about me because of the color of my skin, and those assumptions led to a lot of unnecessary pain for my family. This isn't just about today. It's about how these kinds of biases can hurt people in ways that can't always be undone. Mrs. Perkins nodded, her face full of regret. I understand, she said quietly. I will never make that mistake again. Olivia gave her a small, sad smile. I hope not, she replied, because these kinds of mistakes can have serious consequences. It's important for all of us to think before we act, and to treat everyone with the respect they deserve, no matter what they look like. David, standing beside Olivia, placed a supportive hand on her shoulder. He was proud of how she handled the situation, using it as a teachable moment rather than letting it become just another painful memory. We all need to do better, David added, looking at Mrs. Perkins and the nearby officers. We need to understand that families come in all shapes, sizes, and colors, and we need to embrace that and not fear it. Mrs. Perkins nodded again, tears brimming in her eyes. She had learned a hard lesson today, and she knew she had to do better in the future. Thank you for your understanding, she whispered before slowly walking away, leaving Olivia, David, and Lime to find their peace. Later that evening, back at home, Olivia and David reflected on the day's events. The comfort of their familiar surroundings and the love they shared made them feel safe again. As they tucked Lime into bed, his little face finally at peace, Olivia leaned down and kissed him on the forehead. I will always protect you, no matter what, she whispered, brushing his hair gently as he drifted off to sleep. David stood beside her, and they both watched Lime sleep, the room filled with the soft sounds of their son's breathing. The day had been a harsh reminder of the challenges they faced as a family, but it had also strengthened their bond. They knew that the world could be quick to judge, but their love and commitment to each other would always see them through. As they closed Lime's bedroom door and walked hand in hand down the hallway, they felt a renewed sense of purpose. This experience had brought them closer together, and they were determined to continue standing strong against prejudice. They knew that the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but as long as they faced it together, they could overcome anything. And with that, Olivia and David knew that their love would carry them through whatever challenges came next. They would use their story to teach others, to help their community grow and understand that diversity should be celebrated, not feared. And most importantly, they would continue to build a safe, loving world for Lime. A world where he could grow up knowing that he was loved, no matter what. If you were moved by this story and want to hear more powerful and inspiring tales, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Join our community as we explore more stories that inspire change and celebrate love, understanding, and diversity.